My name is Haunted Fears, and tonight you're not just listening to horror stories, you're stepping into them. In hospitals, people go to be saved, but some never leave the same way, and some don't leave at all. Before we begin, if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and join the Haunted Fears horror family, because once you hear what happened in these halls, you'll never look at a hospital the same way again. The title of tonight's video is 3 Hospital Horror Stories. These aren't jump scare fantasies or over-the-top monsters. These are the kinds of experiences that start normal: routine surgeries, late-night visits, quiet shifts, and then slowly twist into something you can't explain, something you wish you could forget. As you listen, pay attention to the details. The sound of a call button that no one answers. Footsteps in an empty corridor. A familiar voice calling your name from the wrong room. Ask yourself, if you are alone in a hospital at night, how sure are you that everything around you is truly alive? Settle in, turn the lights down, and stay close, Haunted Fears family. It's already too late to back out now. Hospitals are supposed to be places where chaos is controlled, where people go in broken and come out better. What happened to me after that surgery made me question whether every wing in that building is even in the same present. My name is Mila, and a few months ago I went to the hospital with what I thought was just bad stomach pain. I figured it was something I ate or a bug, and I waited too long, trying to tough it out. By the time I gave in, I was doubled over, sweating, and could barely stand. They told me quickly it was my appendix, and it needed to come out. After that, everything blurred. Papers, IV, questions, bright lights overhead as they rushed me toward the operating room. Someone told me to count backwards. Something cold ran up my arm, and then there was nothing. Waking up wasn't like normal sleep. It felt like pushing through heavy water. The first things I registered were the tight pressure of a cuff on my arm and a beeping somewhere to my left. My mouth was desert dry, my eyelids heavy. I thought, okay, surgery's done. I'm in recovery. For a few seconds, that calmed me. Then I noticed the beeping didn't sound right. It didn't have that steady, reassuring rhythm. It stuttered, slow, then fast, then dead flat for a moment. My chest didn't feel like it matched that sound. My heart felt relatively calm, but the monitor sounded like it belonged to someone crashing. I forced my eyes open. The ceiling above me was white tile, a little stained. The fluorescent light buzzed audibly, with a faint flicker at the edges. When my vision cleared, I saw the rest of the room. It was a single room, not the shared recovery space they'd mentioned. One bed, mine. One rolling metal table with a plastic pitcher. A beige monitor on a bracket near my head, bulkier and older than the sleek screens I'd seen before surgery. It glowed with a green line instead of the flat color displays I remembered. The curtains were a faded mint, with a pattern that looked like it belonged decades ago. Nothing looked filthy or abandoned, just old. Like I'd woken up on a different floor than I'd been on earlier. I shifted my left arm and felt the tug of an IV. When I raised my hand, plastic tapped my wrist. I looked down to read the ID bracelet, expecting my name, my date of birth, today's date. It wasn't my name. The letters were wrong, and under them was a year from the 1980s. For a second, I thought the meds were messing with my eyes. I blinked hard, brought the bracelet closer. Same wrong name. Same old year. The plastic was cloudy and a little cracked, like it had been worn longer than a few hours. A cold feeling slid down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. I told myself it was a clerical error, an old bracelet someone had reused by mistake. I turned my head, looking for something normal, and found the call button on its cord. I tightened my fingers around it and pressed. I thought I heard a faint buzz somewhere far away, like it had registered at a desk. I waited for footsteps, a voice, anything. Nothing happened. I pressed again, and again. No voice crackled over a speaker. No shoes squeaked in the hall. The only sounds were the buzzing light, my IV drip, and that uneven beeping beside my head. My breathing picked up. I tried to slow it and told myself I'd just come out of anesthesia. People hallucinate, get confused. Maybe I was misinterpreting everything. I needed to see the hallway, see real people, hear someone talk to me in a normal way. Getting out of bed felt like dragging myself up from the bottom of a pool. My abdomen burned around the incision, but I gripped the bed rail and forced my legs over the side. The floor was freezing under my feet. I pulled the IV pole along, wobbling as I shuffled to the door. The door was partly open. I leaned against it and pushed it wider. The hallway outside was lit, but the light was darker, yellower than what I remembered earlier. The walls were an off-white that had aged, the baseboards scuffed. The nurse's station down the hall looked wrong, too. No big flat monitors, no glowing computer screens, just bulky equipment and a few plastic chairs. A wall clock with real hands ticked loud enough that I could hear every second. The air smelled like antiseptic layered over something stale, like this section didn't get used much. I glanced at the room number plaque outside my door. The style of the engraving was old-fashioned. The number itself meant nothing to me. It wasn't what they'd said when they checked me in. I pressed the call button again, this time watching the hall. A shadow slid along the far wall, then a figure in white passed my doorway. Relief hit. A nurse, finally. "Excuse me," I croaked. My voice sounded dry and small. The figure didn't turn. I saw just enough to know something was off. The uniform wasn't scrubs. It was a white dress that fell below the knee with a stiff cap perched on carefully pinned hair. Dark, polished shoes. I had walked through pre-op and the halls before surgery. No one looked like that. "Hello?" I tried again, louder. The figure kept moving, vanishing around a corner without even a glance toward my room. My heart thudded faster. I looked back down at the bracelet. That wrong name, that old date, stayed stubbornly the same. The beeping beside my empty bed sputtered into a long, flat tone. I jerked my head toward it in panic, expecting that awful continuous sound to mean I was dying. The line on the screen was flat for a second, then snapped back into a jagged rhythm like nothing had happened. I couldn't stay in that room. Leaning on the IV pole, I stepped fully into the hall. The floor creaked faintly under my weight. I looked both ways. No visitors, no staff, no one. Just rows of closed doors and the nurse's station unmanned. I hobbled toward the station, each step a white-hot stab in my side. On the counter, a clipboard lay open. A list of names filled the top page, typed in a blocky font. The last name for my bracelet was near the top. The date on the sheet matched the one printed on the band. The 80s, not now. I scanned the rest of the list for Mila. My name wasn't there. A prickling sensation crawled over my skin. This wasn't just a wrong bracelet. According to that paper, I didn't exist here. A soft squeak echoed from down the hall. Rubber soles on linoleum. I set the clipboard down with shaking hands and turned. The same woman in the white dress rounded the corner, walking toward me. Up close, she looked solid and human. No glowing eyes, no transparency. Her uniform was crisp. Her hair was neatly styled, her expression composed. But there was something about the way she moved, smooth, gliding almost, that made every instinct I had scream wrong. She carried a metal tray lined with instruments on a cloth. I didn't recognize most of them, but they looked older, heavier, not like the more modern tools I'd glimpsed earlier. When she saw me, she didn't look surprised to find a post-op patient wandering. Instead, she looked like she'd found something she'd been searching for. "There you are," she said, voice calm. "You shouldn't be up. We're not done with you yet." Her eyes dropped to my wrist. She read the name there, the wrong one, and used it like it belonged to me. Hearing it spoken out loud by someone who clearly believed it made my stomach twist. "That's not my name," I said. "I just had my appendix out. Today. I was in surgery. I'm not." I glanced at the clipboard, at the other names, at the clock that insisted it was decades earlier than it should have been. She gave me the kind of patient smile you give someone confused. "You've been through a lot," she said. "It's normal to be disoriented. Let's get you back to bed. We'll get started shortly." "Started with what?" I asked, but I already knew I didn't want the answer. She didn't respond. She just took a step closer, tray steady in her hands. The instruments clinked softly. A rising, primal panic overrode the pain. Every cell in my body told me that if I let her steer me back into that room, if I lay down and accepted whatever procedure she had in mind, something would happen that belonged to that other name on my bracelet, not me. "I need my doctor," I said, backing up until I hit the counter. "The one who did my surgery today. I need to be in the main recovery area. This isn't where I'm supposed to be." Something in her eyes flickered. Annoyance, confusion. For just a heartbeat, she looked less sure. Then her face smoothed. "Please," she said, voice firmer. "You're making this harder. You belong in your room." She stepped forward again. I turned and moved the other way down the hall, dragging the IV pole with me. She called after me, but I didn't look back. Doors passed on either side, some open on dark rooms, some closed. The layout didn't match anything I remembered from being wheeled to surgery. It felt like a different building altogether. Up ahead, a door stood out from the others. It was newer, solid, with a narrow vertical window. Through the glass, I saw bright white light and something that looked like a flat-screen monitor. It was like a fragment of the hospital I recognized had been grafted onto this place. Behind me, her footsteps quickened. "Mila, stop," she called, using the wrong name again, like mine had no place here. I grabbed the handle and yanked. Light flooded over me, harsh and modern. The smell of the air shifted, sharper, cleaner. I stumbled through, heart pounding. "Mila, hey, what are you doing? You can't be out of bed like that." The voice was different. Younger, casual, American, with none of that old-fashioned cadence. I blinked up and saw a nurse in modern scrubs hurrying toward me, hands raised as if to catch me. Behind her, a monitor displayed my name, correctly spelled, along with my actual information. The corridor was bright, the equipment current. The nurse's station buzzed with activity. I looked down at my wrist. My own bracelet stared back, my name, my real date of birth. Today's date. The plastic was new and clear, no cracks. My legs gave out. They got me back into bed, talking about blood pressure and pain meds and how I shouldn't have tried to walk. When I tried to explain what I'd seen, the old hallway, the nurse in the dress, the clipboard with someone else's name and an 80s date, they traded looks over my head. One of them gently mentioned that coming out of anesthesia can cause vivid dreams, that people sometimes sleepwalk or get turned around. By the time a doctor came to check on me, I was second-guessing myself so hard I barely knew how to tell the story without hearing how insane it sounded. Before I left the hospital, though, I asked for my records. When they finally handed me the packet, I went through every page. Vitals, medications, notes. Everything looked ordinary until I noticed a blank stretch. About 45 minutes with no entries, no nurse check-ins, no vitals logged, no meds. When I asked about that gap, the person at the desk frowned and said, "Sometimes the system lags or people chart later." When I asked if there was camera footage from the recovery area during that window, they clicked around and shrugged. That file, they said, was corrupted. Most days I tell myself it was the drugs, fear, and exhaustion, a stressed brain misfiring. But sometimes, late at night, I remember the way that nurse said, "We're not done with you yet," and the certainty in her voice when she used a name that wasn't mine. And I wonder if, for those 45 undocumented minutes, I woke up in a part of the hospital that still belongs to another time, and to another patient who never left. My name is Lucy, and the night this happened, I was just trying to visit my grandmother in the ICU. She'd had a stroke a few days earlier, and the doctors weren't promising much, but my family refused to let her lie there alone. We rotated visits. That evening was my turn. It was already dark when I walked through the automatic doors, got my visitor sticker, and headed for the elevators, like I'd done the past 2 nights. By then, I knew the route. Up to the 4th floor, step out, turn right, follow the blue stripe on the wall, past the little family waiting area with the vending machines, through the double doors marked intensive care unit. It was muscle memory. Inside, the ICU looked like every other modern one. Glass front rooms, constant quiet beeping, staff moving with focused urgency. I sat by my grandmother's bed, talking to her about nothing in particular. Work, the weather, my brother's stupid jokes over text. Her eyes were half open, unfocused, but every now and then I thought I saw a tiny shift when I mentioned certain names. Maybe it was real, maybe it was wishful thinking. Either way, talking felt better than sitting in silence listening to monitors breathe for her. After about an hour, a nurse leaned in and asked if I could step out so they could reposition her and check some things. Routine. I squeezed my grandmother's hand, told her I'd be right back, and stepped into the hallway. I decided to hit the restroom before settling back in. The family area and bathroom were just outside the ICU doors. I walked past the same framed landscape print, the same hand sanitizer dispenser, into the same small bathroom I'd already used before. I washed my hands, stared at my tired face in the mirror, and reminded myself to hold it together. When I walked back out, I turned the few steps I knew would take me directly to the ICU double doors. They were gone. In their place, at the end of the short hallway, was a single solid door with a little square window and a sign that said, "Staff only." No glass ICU doors. No intensive care unit sign. No family nook with the TV. I stopped, blinking, genuinely confused. I turned around. Behind me was exactly what I'd just seen going in. The bathroom door, the same landscape print, the same sanitizer dispenser. I hadn't walked far enough to get turned around. There weren't even branching hallways here, just a short run and a door that should have led to the ICU. I walked a little farther, expecting the layout to open up into something familiar. Instead, the corridor stretched longer than it should have. A laminated sign pointed toward departments I didn't recognize on that floor. The blue stripe on the wall I'd been following for days was gone. A cold little knot formed in my stomach. I told myself this was just normal hospital confusion. Maybe I'd stepped out of a different bathroom without realizing, or taken a wrong turn. I decided to go back to the elevators and reset. I followed the hallway until it reached a T. To the left, I could see an illuminated exit sign and what looked like elevators at the far end. I went that way. As I got closer, I saw they weren't the elevators I'd been using. The panel looked older, the stainless steel more scratched, the floor indicator mechanical instead of digital. It didn't matter. I told myself, elevators are elevators. I pressed the button. When the car arrived, I stepped inside and hit the button for the 4th floor, thinking if I rode down to the lobby and back up, I'd reorient myself. The elevator jerked, then started moving. I felt it go down, though the floor display above the door stayed dark. When the doors opened, it wasn't to the lobby. Another hallway waited for me, narrower, windowless, painted a dull beige. The lights felt dimmer. Doors lined both sides, all closed, each with a narrow vertical window covered by blinds. No sound came from behind them, no voices, no rolling carts, just the faint hum of the building. The elevator doors closed behind me. When I pressed the button to call it back, nothing happened. Fear slid in then, quiet but very real. I wasn't just on the wrong floor. I was somewhere that didn't feel used. I walked, hoping I'd find a nurse's station or a sign pointing somewhere sensible. After a while, a ceiling sign appeared, but the words on it were unfamiliar unit names and abbreviations. Nothing said ICU. Nothing said anything that tied back to where I'd started. I passed a door standing slightly open. Inside was a waiting room, almost identical in layout to the family area I recognized. Rows of chairs, a low table, a TV mounted in the corner. Relieved, I stepped closer. People sat in the chairs, but no one spoke. Their eyes were turned toward the TV, which was showing what looked like hospital security camera feeds, grainy shots of hallways and doors, nurses' stations, empty elevators. The sound was off. "Excuse me," I said from the doorway. "Do you know how to get back to the ICU? I think I got turned around." No one answered. A couple of heads tilted slightly, like they'd registered my presence, but their eyes never really landed on mine. They looked dulled, exhausted, like they'd been sitting there for days. Their visitor stickers were there, but I couldn't read the names from where I stood. On the TV, the feed changed to a hallway that looked disturbingly similar to the one just outside that door. Empty, beige, with the same pattern on the floor. I watched for a second, expecting to see a nurse or a patient appear. The camera view stayed static. "I'll ask at a desk," I muttered, backing away. In the silent hall again, I kept moving. Eventually, I saw a small nurse's station ahead. Desk, computer, rolling chair. Someone in scrubs sat writing on a chart. Relief made my eyes sting. "Hi," I said, walking up. "I'm really sorry. I'm totally lost. I left the ICU for a minute, and now I can't find my way back. Can you tell me how to get to the main ICU? 4th floor?" They looked up slowly, eyes lingering on me a second longer than felt normal, then flicked down the hall as if checking where we were. "You want ICU?" they asked. "Yeah," I said. "My grandmother's there. I went to the bathroom and somehow ended up here." They pointed down the corridor behind me. "Go that way. Take a right, keep walking, you'll see the signs." I turned. The hall stretched out, bending slightly. No signs were visible yet. When I glanced back, the staff member had already dropped their gaze, attention back on paperwork, like I'd never been there. I followed their directions. The corridor did curve right. After a while, I finally saw a sign, ICU, arrow pointing forward. My chest loosened. I reached a pair of double doors with ICU above them and pushed through. For a moment, what I saw almost matched what I expected. Glass front rooms, central station, the hum of machines. But then the differences hit me. The room numbers weren't the same. The names written on boards didn't match the list I'd seen earlier. The desk sat at a different angle. None of the faces were familiar. I backed out, heart pounding. The sign over the doors still said ICU. This wasn't my ICU. The next stretch of time blurred. I went in and out of different elevators, pressed buttons for floors I knew I'd used, and ended up on hallways that all felt wrong. Some were too quiet, some too dim. Every time I thought I'd found a landmark, it shifted into something else when I got closer. A few times, I saw waiting rooms that mirrored each other. Same arrangement, same furniture. But the people inside never spoke, never really looked at me. The TV screens in those rooms showed static or strange hospital feeds with empty corridors. I kept checking clocks when I found them. The hands moved normally. Time wasn't jumping, but it felt like I'd been walking forever, like the building was stretching whenever I tried to pin it down. My panic built slowly. Then all at once, the hallways started to feel narrower, like the walls leaned in just a fraction too much. Directional signs repeated in ways that didn't make sense. I saw the same arrow for imaging twice in what should have been two different directions. My throat tightened. My hands shook. Then, after another turn, I saw a whiteboard outside a room with my grandmother's last name written on it. My knees almost buckled with relief. I hurried to the doorway and looked in. It wasn't my grandmother in the bed. It was a woman about my age, maybe a little older, hooked up to monitors and oxygen. For a half second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing, because her face was my face. Paler, thinner, more worn, but unmistakably mine. Same features, same little mole near my eyebrow. Her eyes were closed. As I stood there, frozen, they opened. She turned her head toward me. We stared at each other. My heart slammed so hard it made me dizzy. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, voice strained but clear. "I'm trying to get back to my grandmother," I said, words rushing out. They told me to step out for a few minutes, and when I came back, everything was different. I keep ending up in the wrong places. I just follow the signs and—" She shook her head, very slightly. "You kept walking," she said, "past where you were meant to stop." Something in the way she said it made my skin crawl more than anything I'd seen so far. It sounded like a simple fact, not an accusation. "I just need to know how to get back to the real ICU," I said. "The one with the glass rooms by the blue stripe on the wall. The one with my grandmother in it." Her eyes shifted past me. Against my better judgment, I glanced back into the hallway. Some of the people I'd seen sitting in those waiting rooms were there now. They stood spaced out along the corridor, all facing me. Their faces were slack, visitor badges still pinned to their clothes. They didn't move toward me. They just watched. I turned back to the woman in the bed. My double, my wrong self, whatever she was. She looked exhausted, resigned, like she'd had this conversation before. "If you keep going," she said quietly, "they'll find a place for you too." The meaning sank in slowly, like cold water. This wasn't about being lost in a normal way. It was about being absorbed. That finally snapped me out of it. I stepped back from the doorway. My hands trembled so badly I had to curl them into fists to stop them shaking visibly. "Go back," she said, "before you forget where you were going." I didn't say anything. I turned and walked, then jogged, then almost ran, ignoring the ache in my legs and the burn in my lungs. I didn't look at the people watching from the hall. I didn't stop at any doors. I picked one direction and followed it. At some point, the corridor did narrow. I could feel the walls close in fractionally. The overhead lights buzzed louder. My shoulder brushed painted drywall. A sign flashed by with ICU and an arrow. I followed it. I saw double doors ahead with frosted glass, familiar glow spilling out at the edges. I pushed through them. I was back in the ICU I knew. The layout was right again. The same central station, the same chairs, the same staff faces. A TV in the family area played some bland show. The clock read 8:12. I'd been gone maybe 20-25 minutes. A nurse glanced up. "There you are," they said casually. "We were just finishing up in her room. You can go back in now." I forced my legs to move, like nothing was wrong. When I stepped into my grandmother's room, she looked exactly as she had before. Machines humming. Chest rising and falling shallowly. I sat down and took her hand. "I'm here," I whispered, more to myself than to her. I didn't go far. Her eyelids fluttered, and for the first time since the stroke, I heard her try to form words. They came out rough and broken. "Lost," she rasped. "Heard you down the hall." A chill moved straight through me. I hadn't told anyone I'd gotten lost. I hadn't told anyone anything yet. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe she was half dreaming. I smiled because I didn't know what else to do, and squeezed her hand a little tighter. Eventually, visiting hours ended. I walked back the way I always had, out of her room, past the nurse's station, through the double doors, past the waiting area and that same framed landscape, to the elevators. Everything lined up perfectly. No extra corridors, no strange signs, no wrong elevators. Outside, the hospital looked perfectly ordinary against the night sky. Cars came and went. People walked in and out. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was just another building with 2 bright lights and 2 cold air. I know better now. When I go into a hospital, I stick to the shortest, clearest path I can. I don't explore. I don't follow unfamiliar arrows, and I never, ever wander empty floors alone. Because I can't shake the feeling that somewhere inside those walls is a whole network of hallways that aren't meant for people like me. And if I ever step into them again, they'll be ready this time. Some places feel haunted because of history. This place feels haunted because it won't let the present go. My name is Miles, and I work nights as a custodian in a mid-sized hospital on the edge of a U.S. city. It's not glamorous, but it's steady work, and for the most part, I've always liked the quiet that comes after visiting hours end. People think the creepiest part of a hospital at night is the patients or the ICU, but it isn't. It's the lower levels, where there are fewer windows, fewer people, and way too much space for things to hide. This hospital had a bad year not long ago, a massive pileup on the freeway during a storm, plus a fire at an apartment complex the same month. The news said the hospital was over capacity for weeks. I didn't work here then, but you still hear about it. People mention that winter in a certain tone and then change the subject. The old-timers talk about that surge and how this place hasn't felt right since. I started about a year after all that. At first, I stuck to the easy areas, lobbies, hallways, clinics that closed at 5. But after a few months, my supervisor started assigning me to the sub-basement more often, where the big storage rooms, old files, and the morgue are. Night shift down there is usually dead quiet, no pun intended. You mop, you empty trash, you check for leaks. It's just you, the hum of the building, and whatever your imagination decides to do. The night I'm talking about started like any other. I clocked in at 11, grabbed my cart, and checked the work orders on the computer. That's when I saw it. A maintenance request for water intrusion near the morgue corridor, time-stamped about 20 minutes before my shift. There was a note about a possible ceiling leak or a pipe sweating too much. I sighed, printed it out, and clipped it to my board. I took the elevator down alone, cart rattling a little as the car descended. When the doors opened, that colder, heavier basement air washed over me. Down there, everything echoes. Even just pushing a cart sounds louder than it should. The overhead lights are bright enough, but they feel further away, like they don't quite reach the corners. I started down the main corridor toward the morgue, my wheels squeaking every few seconds. As I walked, I noticed something I'd seen before but never paid much attention to. The lights flickered whenever I passed certain doors. Not a full blackout, just a quick shimmy in the brightness that returned as soon as I moved on. I'd chalked it up to cheap fixtures or bad wiring. This time, though, the pattern bothered me. It only happened at 3 specific doors. Every time my cart rolled by them, the lights hummed louder and dimmed for a heartbeat. Each door was labeled for a storage room we didn't use much anymore, at least not on my shift. I stopped at the first one, listening. Nothing. No voices, no machines, no movement. Just that deep mechanical breathing sound of the building. I considered opening it, then decided to take care of the leak first. It was probably just water, I told myself. Nothing supernatural about plumbing. Near the morgue hallway, I saw the dried streak of water on the floor before I saw where it came from. It ran along the wall, a thin track that had already started to dry. Above it, one of the ceiling tiles was stained and bulging just a bit. I set my cart's brakes, snapped a couple of photos with my phone for the maintenance report, and wrote down the location. Routine. That's when I heard it. The faint squeak of wheels on linoleum behind me just around the corner. It sounded exactly like another cart, my cart, honestly, pushing along at the same rhythm I usually walked. "Anyone down here?" I called, more to prove I wasn't spooked than anything. No answer. The squeaking stopped. I walked back to the main hall and peeked around the corner. It was empty. No other cart, no other staff. The big double doors that led to the older storage section were closed, their little round windows dark. I shrugged it off. Sound travels weird down there. You hear things from floors above, pipes, vents, all kinds of stuff. Still, I check my phone again, opening the camera. Sometimes when something bothers me, I take a quick video. It's dumb, but it makes me feel like if I catch something on camera, then at least I'm not crazy alone. I turned back to my cart. Except it wasn't where I left it. I had parked my cart parallel to the wall, brakes set, right under the stained ceiling tile. Now it sat several feet further down the hall, angled slightly toward the morgue doors. I hadn't heard it move. No squeak, no rattle. For a second, I just stared at it, trying to convince myself I'd misjudged where I'd left it. But the little wet streak from my mop bucket marked where it had been. The streak now ended in a broken trail, like something had rolled through it. "Okay," I muttered. trying to sound amused. Nope. I pulled out my phone, switched to video, and started recording as I walked up to the cart. The timestamp glowed in the corner of the screen. I panned the phone from the wet streak on the floor to the cart's new position, narrating under my breath. So later, I'd remember what I was thinking. I gave the cart a little push, checked the brakes, tested the wheels. Everything felt normal. I texted a still frame to a coworker I trusted, just the part with the cart by the morgue doors and the weird track in the water. I added, "Tell me this doesn't look wrong to you." It took a minute, but he replied, "Why are you down there alone? That place is messed up at night." That didn't help. I got back to work, patching what I could around the leak, putting up a wet floor sign, making a note that a daytime plumber needed to come check it. All the while, I felt that strange prickling sensation of being watched, not from in front of me, but from a distance, like something was at the far end of the hall, out of sight, keeping pace with me. On my way back, I finally gave in and decided to look inside one of those storage rooms with the flickering lights. The first door's label was half peeled, but I could still make out "Personal Effects, Hold." My key turned in the lock with a sticky little twist. The smell hit me first. Plastic, cardboard, that faint dusty scent of boxes that have been closed for too long. I flicked on the light. Rows of metal shelving filled the room, lined with clear plastic bags and battered suitcases, each tagged with barcodes and names. Some tags had dates. I recognized the month and year instantly, the same month as that freeway pileup and the apartment fire. I stepped closer, scanning the labels. I recognized last names I'd heard in passing. A few had notes about mass casualty event written in small print. These weren't decades-old relics. These were recent. Belongings nobody had claimed or processed yet. I took a photo, then another. Not to share with anyone, but because something about the way those bags were crammed together felt wrong, like they were waiting. My phone camera shutter sounded too loud in the quiet room. My coworker texted again. "Seriously, man, don't mess around in that hallway. You heard about the nights during the surge, right?" I stared at the message and typed back. "What about them?" He replied. "Stuff in that area never settled. Ask anyone. Alarms going off with no patience. Names reappearing on boards. They never got all the bugs out, they say. But it doesn't feel like bugs." I slipped my phone into my pocket and left the storage room, flicking off the light. As I pulled the door shut, the hallway lights above me dimmed for a second, then snapped back. I kept going, quieter now, listening. The morgue is at the far end of the sub-basement. It's not as dramatic as people think. Just a steel door, a faded sign, and a small desk outside where someone sits during the day. At night, it's usually empty. That's where I was heading when I heard the banging. It was a deep, rhythmic thud, metal against metal coming from beyond the morgue door. For a second, I assumed it was pipes. Old buildings make noise. But this wasn't random. It was 3 hard bangs, a pause, then 3 more. Over and over, steady enough that my brain wanted to find a pattern in it. I should have called upstairs. I should have walked away. Instead, I did what years of being the guy who just fixes things trained me to do. I went to check. "Hello," I called, half hoping someone would answer and make it all normal. No one did. I unlocked the outside door with my master key and stepped into the small anteroom where they do paperwork and prep. The banging got louder. It was coming from the cooler. I stood in front of the thick metal door and hesitated. Then I opened it. Cold air rushed over me, biting through my uniform. The cooler was lit by harsh, fluorescent strips, reflecting off the stainless steel of the body drawers. There were a few tags on the outside of some, but most were blank. The banging stopped the second I stepped in. "Okay," I said under my breath, nerves fraying. "Nope, really not funny." Behind me, the cooler door swung shut with a heavy thud I felt in my chest. The latch clicked. I turned back toward it immediately and grabbed the handle. It didn't budge. My breath puffed out in white clouds now. The temperature was dropping fast, or maybe I was just that scared. The hairs on my arms stood up under my sleeves. Goosebumps crawled across my skin. Then the first handprint appeared. On the nearest drawer, a milky white print spread slowly across the metal from the inside, like something warm pressed against it from within. Then another, on the drawer below, fingers, palms, all smearing in frantic patterns. Across the room, more appeared on other doors. Within seconds, half the drawers had ghostly prints blooming on them, like someone trapped was trying to push their way out. I backed up until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. My mind kept trying to reject what my eyes were showing me, to make it into condensation forming in weird ways, into my own breath bouncing back. But the hands were wrong sizes, wrong angles, too many at once. I yanked my phone out with clumsy fingers and hit record. If I was going to die of a heart attack in a morgue cooler, someone was at least going to see what I saw. The camera struggled with the glare, but it caught enough. Pale shapes sliding against metal, the smears of prints, my own voice cursing under my breath. One drawer in the center of the wall shuddered, then slowly slid open a few inches on its own. The air coming out of it felt even colder. My hand shook as I raised the phone, zooming in. Inside was a modern body bag, zipped up with a white tag clipped to the zipper. The tag had today's date printed on it, and a first name that made my stomach drop, mine. The last name was different, but my name was there, in bold letters, logged as received, at the exact time printed on the work order I'd gotten at the start of my shift. I don't remember making a sound, but I must have, because my breath turned ragged on the video. For a second, I was convinced I'd look down and see my own body lying there when the bag unzipped. I didn't wait to find out. I shoved the drawer back in with both hands, hard in my throat, and lunged for the cooler door again. This time, the handle gave way, with a screech. The door burst open, and I stumbled out into the anteroom, nearly falling to my knees. There was someone there now, a staff member who'd come down from another floor, eyes wide at the sight of me crashing out of the cooler. I must have looked insane, sweating and shivering at the same time, breathing like I'd run a marathon. "Are you okay?" they asked. Door wouldn't open, I managed. "Something's wrong with it. There's something wrong in there." They looked from me to the door, then back. "It's not supposed to lock from the inside," they said, frowning. "You sure you didn't just panic and—" "Check the footage," I said, voice shaking. "And look at this." I shoved my phone at them with the video paused at the frame of all the handprints. Their expression shifted from concern to a tighter, more guarded look. Not disbelief exactly, but that careful neutral face people use when they don't want to commit to what they're seeing. Later, upstairs, security pulled the footage from the hallway cameras. We watched the clip together in a cramped office, the blue glow of the monitor making everyone's faces look tired. The video showed my cart sliding a few feet on its own down the hall, wheels turning, no one touching it. You could see me come back around the corner staring. In another clip from outside the morgue, the cooler door visibly shuddered in its frame while no one was near it. The hallway mic picked up faint banging. When I finally emerged, I looked like I'd seen a ghost. Maybe I had. Administration did what they always do. They took statements. They talked about possible electrical issues, air pressure differentials, mechanical malfunctions. They told me the tag with my name had to be some kind of data entry error, someone mixing up fields. An unfortunate coincidence. They never said I was lying. They just wrapped everything in words that made it sound like the building itself had glitched. The thing is, the evidence didn't vanish. My videos are still on my phone. The hallway clips are still on the server. In a group chat a few weeks later, someone shared a grainy screenshot of a whiteboard from that same sub-basement, where names from the old surge had reappeared in fresh handwriting, only to be erased again when someone blinked. Another night, a nurse posted a short video of a gurney slowly rolling out of an empty room by itself and stopping in the hall as if waiting. Nobody talks about it officially. If you bring it up in the wrong meeting, people slide right past it and change the subject. But if you catch the night staff alone, in the break room or by the vending machines, they admit they've heard the banging too. They've seen names on screens that shouldn't be there. They've watched doors close on their own and equipment roll a few inches like someone tugged it. I put in for a transfer to a different area after that night. I still work at the same hospital, still on nights, but I avoid the morgue corridor as much as I can. When a work order comes in stamped for that hallway, I feel my chest tighten. Sometimes I swap tasks with someone else. Sometimes, if I can't, I go, but I keep it quick, keep my eyes down, and never, ever step into the cooler alone. There's a difference between stories and proof. Most ghost stories dissolve when you shine too much light on them. This one is worse in the light, because it doesn't disappear. It just sits there, in videos, in logs, in the quiet things people admit when they think no one's recording. So the next time you're in a hospital late at night and you see a cart sitting by itself at the end of a long, empty hallway, just remember, someone like me might have parked it somewhere else, and we might have the footage to prove it moved on its own. If you want to hear more stories like this, true accounts from people who've seen what hospitals hide after dark, make sure you subscribe to Haunted Fears and join the Haunted Fears horror family. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next time we go back into the places everyone else pretends are normal.
This story, including the research script and editing, was completely created by me. Thank you for supporting original content.